Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whenever or wherever you are in the world. I'm Mark Edwards, and this is the Channel Zone podcast. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Tess Garner, Senior Director of Global Channel and Alliances Marketing at Tenable. Tess has built an impressive career in enterprise and cybersecurity marketing with roles with companies like Arrow, where I think you were a BDM for F5, and now at Tenable, where she works at the intersection of brand, demand generation, partners, and alliances, and all of this on a global scale. Now, what really caught my attention when I was introduced to Tess is that alongside her senior leadership role, Tess is currently completing a DBA, that's a doctorate in business administration. Her research focusing on how cybersecurity marketing and demand generation have evolved post-COVID. And she's developing a new framework to help make sense of the much noisier, more complex buying landscape that we now live in. Now, if that wasn't enough, Tess has also written a children's book, Charlie and Augie, which is centered on the idea of doing one thing at a time. In a world of constant distraction, it turns out that lesson might be just as relevant for marketeers, leaders, and sellers as it is for children. So with that, Tess, welcome to the Channel Zone.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, fantastic, fantastic. So, just to kick us off here, how about just a little run through on what you do at Tenable, and perhaps also just a brief description of Tenable themselves. What do they do?
Yeah, so Tenable is the exposure management company, and we help our customers understand and reduce their cyber risk. So, my particular role at Tenable is focused on leading an amazing team of marketeers in
Yes.
partners to excite, engage, and enable our ecosystem of alliance partners, distributors, managed service providers, and resellers. So, really working with that community to help them understand our mission and
Yes.
join us on our journey to exposure management.
Yeah. I mean, there is a huge audience that you've got there that you mentioned. So, and not only in its breadth across the IT ecosystem, but global as well. Am I right?
Yes, we're a global team, and of course that comes with lots of interesting moments and also challenges. We obviously have
Yes.
different languages, different cultures, but that's what also makes the job really interesting. Our team are spread across the world. We have, although my team is a just a specific team on partner marketing. All of our marketeers really are channel marketeers. So if they're working in the field, they're also working with our partners. We're a 100% channel company, so partners are at the heart of everything we do. So whether someone's in the partner marketing team or not, they're focused on how we win the hearts and minds of our partners and that ecosystem. And having marketing teams around the world, allows us to understand those sort of regional nuances so that we are truly a global company.
Yeah. So from your perspective, in the kind of global role, do you get emails at 5:30 in the morning then, right through till kind of 11 o'clock at night? Is there?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I get the emails, and I guess the good thing about that is you have to learn how to manage your time, right? We could always be available all the time, but it's about how we ring fence, what's important. And again, even going back to cybersecurity, right? Focusing on what matters most. So, there are urgent communications, of course, but there are also things that can wait until the next day. So I'm getting better at, I'm a night owl, so I like working in the evening, but I'm getting better at, understanding, when we communicate and when we don't, and also respecting my team in that regard,
Yes.
understanding that people work different hours. And I do actually have an email signature at the bottom of my email, which is,
Yes.
I may work different hours to you, but please respond in your working hours. So you fully understand that across time zones, everyone works differently, and
Yeah,
it
yeah.
works.
No, well done with that because said I've never had a global role. I've worked globally, but I've never had a team as such. But my daughter was working at CC in a global capacity, and again, it was emails from the Far East, first thing, very early in the morning, right through to the end of the day. It really is a challenge. So, but you'd think. Greenwich Mean Time. You'd think being in the middle, but it just actually just means that you've got a perfect opportunity, I suppose, to cover that global role. But I think it's very challenging. So well done to you on that. Now I'm not a marketeer. I would say, well, I think it's pretty obvious. I'm a salesman through and through. Really, that's been my life, my career within the IT ecosystem. You're a marketeer. Sales and marketing. I don't know whether you understand sales or sales understand marketing, but and then the difference between what's the difference between channel marketing or marketing to partners or marketing direct? Can you kind of, as I said, explain it to me like a 5-year-old in that respect? How can I understand it? What's the difference?
Yeah, of course. So just going back to your point about sort of sales and marketing alignment, I think when we're looking at demand generation now, and especially in this kind of world, post-COVID, if you like, I think we all have to be aligned. If we're not all focused on demand generation together on that journey,
Yeah.
then you can't be successful. So I think sales and marketing really, especially where I work now, is we're really aligned. We really are one team. We're a
Right.
revenue marketing team, if you like. We're all
Yeah.
focused on, being that team. Specifically in my role, the biggest difference between direct field marketing and partner marketing is, for me, is about winning the hearts and minds of our partners. People buy from people. People want to work with people. So relationship building and creating those moments for people, to remember how we made them feel is a really big part of our team's job. Whether it's the events we create, the content we create, the enablement sessions we put on, it's about, the content we provide. Everything is focused on helping our partner ecosystem to be, like I say, engaged, enabled, and excited to work with Tenable. So I think that's a real difference. Whilst relationships matter across all types of marketing, it's really a fundamental basis of partner marketing for me, is those relationships. And, like I say, people remember how you made them feel. And it's bringing something else to marketing, which is that kind of human connection. So I would liken partner marketing much more to sort of B2C marketing, really. And I think it's moving that way even more.
Right. Do you meet your partners often, and in what kind of circumstances and situations? Mainly events and conferences, exhibitions.
Yeah, we meet. I mean, like I say, relationships in the channel are so important. So we make it a real priority to make sure that, not only myself, but my team and our wider partner team globally are, always meeting our partners, whether that's, in their offices. I
Yes.
go to distribution offices, partner offices, to host meetings, enablement days. We also host events, we attend conferences. So, we regularly meet our partners in person, whether that's one to one or one to many. And it's a huge part of what we do here at Tenable.
This episode of the Channel Zone podcast is brought to you by In Connection, the trusted events agency to some of the biggest names in IT. In Connection knows that in today's fast-paced world, it's not just about delivering a return on your events investment. It's about delivering unforgettable experiences. Because some events fade within hours, while others become memories that are talked about for years. In Connection, the go-to event agency for the IT channel, creating memories that matter. So on the part of meeting and meeting people and people buying from people, if I can kind of bring in, you did an MBA, so you did that during lockdown. Congratulations, very well done. I'm not sure what everybody else was up to, but it looks like you were very, very busy. You did an MBA at that point. Now you're currently working on a DBA. I didn't know they existed. This is a doctorate of business administration, and from what I read, the thesis is focused on cybersecurity marketing and demand generation. Again, I excuse the scare quotes, post-COVID. But I'm interested there. How do you think COVID and the pandemic and how did they impacted my world, as I'm sure they impacted everybody's, but how did it impact cybersecurity marketing in particular?
Yeah, so a DBA, and to be honest with you, I hadn't really heard of it either. I think as I was going through my MBA journey, I really enjoyed it. And actually, I felt like the bit I really wanted to do was that kind of primary research, sort of like finding a new subject, if you like, and really going deep into it. So when I started exploring, and I was like, okay, wow, this actually exists. And it was like the next level on. I was like, I've got to do it. I might be mad, but I kind of thought, the journey didn't feel finished until
Well
I kind of
done.
completed it. So, it's not easy by any stretch of the imagination, but I think if you enjoy learning, it is. And I really have enjoyed it. So the topic is innovating B2B demand generation in a post-COVID cybersecurity market. That's the official title, without
Right.
sounding like a total geek.
Yes.
But it's all about the innovating demand generation. So when we look at the traditional marketing funnel, that stage-gated linear process, it's kind of looking at that and thinking, is that model that was created over 100 years ago when computers didn't even exist, is that relevant to a cybersecurity market today, right?
Right.
So that's really the kind of the crux of it. And actually interviewing, marketing, senior marketing leaders across the cybersecurity vendors to understand their views and get their first-hand experiences of what it was like, pre and post COVID for demand
Right.
generation. Things like, the trend of digitalization was already happening, but what COVID did is it sped it up. We had
Yes.
securing the remote workforce. And specifically from a marketing perspective, we went from events, regular events, that in-person
Yes.
connection, especially
Yes.
with the channel, which was really important. And overnight that ended. So we had to pivot. We saw traditional marketing, like direct mail made a comeback,
It's bizarre.
overnight. Yeah, we had to, where people did telemarketing before into office numbers, they didn't exist anymore. Those numbers weren't in action. There was no one
Yes.
behind the phone.
Yes.
Email marketing made a comeback. So what it did is it shifted overnight how we had to pivot, to digital marketing, like say direct mail, and just it changed our world overnight, in many ways, but
Yes.
specifically that way. And what it did on the other side for the recipient is it gave us different expectations about marketing. Before, if someone was in an office, they would perhaps go to an event after work, and that made sense because they were in the location. We're now taking people from their home to an event. It's got to be a really compelling reason for you to want to leave your desk, your family, your pets, your home, whatever your lifestyle you got used to during COVID. There has to be a different reason. People's expectations now aren't like, oh, I can pop in after work. It's like I have to leave my home, go there, and then I must really want to be there. So as a marketer, it's like, how do we create those moments where people want to come and reconnect with us in person? And also we had the change of personalization. We have, as a human, not a job role, we expect this level of personalization. I can go onto a website and buy it now. If I want to know some information, I've got AI at my fingertips. I can compare four different products in, within seconds. So those moments that we're expecting ourselves as B2C consumers, they apply on our job roles. I think that blurring between your job role, you know, the person as the cybersecurity buyer is
Right.
also the person at home with interests and they want to know information, they want self-service. So things like stage gated forms perhaps no longer work now because people want to compare, they want to take that buying journey further
Right.
along by themselves because that's what they expect in their own life.
A stage gated form, is that oh, I'm interested in that, but I've got to give you my email address and my job role and how many people I'm responsible for. Is that again so often? I'll just kind of, oh no, I'll leave it. Is that they still exist out there? But are you saying that that clearly has now changed? Those barriers have to come down.
Yeah, and I guess it depends on which company. Obviously, I'm just talking from my own research and what
Yeah.
I've heard is that, people are people don't want to have that moment where they're captured as a lead, if you
Captured.
like. They want to be able to explore, and discover and actually go on that journey themselves and have that self-service. So if you cannot provide that information quickly, they can find it elsewhere. So,
Yes.
thinking about, cybersecurity vendors, not just where I work, but in general, it's about how do we have that information accessible so that we are supporting buyers on their journey and giving the information they want easily. Because as humans and consumer buyers, they're used to getting that. I know that was a
Yes.
huge shift. I think the trend had already started, but actually I think the pandemic sped up the entire.
Accelerated it, didn't it? Yeah. I think
Yeah,
I saw
absolutely.
something that I think it might have been Microsoft that said that their growth projections for Teams, they got 10 years within a year. You know what I mean? That's it massively sped things up. And I think if you add on top of that now also AI, which is really, now in the hands of the consumer and as has been for the last, let's say, 12 or 18 months, extraordinarily different world. So I'm really interested in what it is that you're doing in that area because I think that it said COVID was still. It feels does it feel like a long time ago now? I think it kind of does in some respects, isn't it? I
Yeah.
mean, it was 2020, 2021, a little bit in 22, but it was such a dramatic change to the world that we live in. So you made great use of your time, that's for sure. I just kind of downed tools for 6 months. As I said, my customers were having to radically change their business. I think the last thing they needed was me speaking to them on the phone or whatever else. So I just kind of backed off for a little bit. But the world has definitely changed. When's the so I don't a PhD? You're writing that thesis. When will that be completed by, and will that be available then to the general public as well as just academia?
Yeah, so it's slightly different. So a PhD is a different track. So a
Right,
doctorate is more about applied business. So obviously we have the theoretical contribution of the thesis, but actually the main differentiator for a DBA is the applied business. Like I say, it's real world. You're a real professional. So
right.
I would class myself as kind of, the academic side is something that I'm learning, but obviously I'm a business professional. So they come together. And yes, we will be publishing the new demand generation engine and the thesis. It does get, it will get published again this year at some point. Again, with these things, they can, there's no kind of like hard and fast
Right.
uh, deadline date I can give you, but it will be at some point this year.
And can you give a little bit more on the framework itself? You said you mentioned, I think, the old model was the funnel. Has that changed, or is your framework well not related to that, or is it or isn't it?
Yeah, so I mean, again, there are so many sort of demand generation funnels that have existed over time. I think so. My specific research is looking at the traditional funnel, which is kind of the original, if you like, the MQL to SQL to opportunity. It's looking at that as the kind of benchmark. There are many that have been developed before, but I get in research we have to make sure that we're kind of really focused on a specific area, and it's really looking at. Does that stage gated approach exist anymore? As a buyer, do we follow a journey? And what the research is discovering that isn't true. What happens is buyers can come into that funnel, if you like, the engine at
Yes.
any point. We have a lot of peer-to-peer recommendations. So things like, socials, invisible socials, where peer groups are meeting and talking and discussing, and getting advice and guidance from each other, and they're not visible to vendors, right? So it's about, in the traditional marketing funnel, that wasn't a consideration. Now we have to consider the places that buyers discuss and interact and exchange thoughts and ideas and professional discussions that are invisible to vendors. So when we're looking at the engine, we now have the new, I'm calling it an engine, it could be a framework
Right.
to be decided, but we have AI, we have social media groups, we have these kind of like invisible places that we cannot penetrate and actually understand what's going on. We have the desire for self-service. We have more buyers per purchase, if you like. So there's so many changes. We've also got the partner ecosystems and how they can be part of that demand generation process. So what the new engine is going to do is really capture all of that and see it as more of like kind of a looping journey where buyers can come in and out many times, back in and out before they actually make the purchase. And then also looking at that post purchase, what happens when, again, talking agnostically, because actually it's
Right.
not that tenable, it's about, the market, is what happens when a vendor wants to have that expansion, cross-sell discussion, and how do we turn partners into our advocates, which then come back into that kind of buyer journey.
Yes.
So they're the kind of key parts of it. So for me, it's not a linear process. For example, if you take it like a fax machine, when you were
Right.
selling those in the day, you could,
I
you know,
did.
yeah, you understand. Yeah, well, you'll know better than me. People had a desire for it. They looked at the options available, maybe in a catalog. And they
Correct.
went to purchase because there was no other option.
No.
It was, paper catalogs. You
Yes.
called up, and there were a few options. Now, when you can put vendors into, AI tools and compare the top 10 vendors in a certain cybersecurity remit,
Yes.
that makes the job of marketeers a lot harder because why would they pick you? Are you in the hearts and minds? And it goes back to, demand generation has to be about, do they know who you are first and foremost? Because if they don't, the rest of it is, it won't work.
Yes, yeah. We used to have you won't go back this far, but we used to have site sellers, as they were called. So like little booklet with your brochures in, and you would go up to it. You'd actually attend a customer site. You'd do a demonstration, pull the fax machine out of a little case, put it on the desk. You'd get lots of oohs and ahs. Believe it or not, this is in a world before the mobile phone. So, and as a piece of technology, it really was quite extraordinary. So when you compare that way of working, and I worked in that time, but you compare it to where we are now, as you said, where people have at their disposal, whether on their smartphone or online, the world is at their fingertips. So it is extraordinarily different, very, very complicated. And I suppose your job is to try and work a way through that. Now, you mentioned social media. So how does social media in general, but LinkedIn in particular, I'm interested in your thoughts on that. How does social media, but then LinkedIn in particular, how do they fit into the channel alliance marketing mix?
Yeah, I think LinkedIn is really important for me as a marketeer, and I think as generally in companies at the moment. I went to a B2B marketing conference recently, and I went to a keynote which was, LinkedIn's cool again, right? I think we're seeing a lot more companies starting to leverage the platform because it's where their target audience are.
Right.
And I'm personally a massive fan of LinkedIn. I really enjoy using it. But what we have to remember is that we have to get out of the fishbowl. And again, I'm talking generally here as marketing, not for my
Right.
own company. But if we're posting to people we work with or people we know who aren't actually interested in what we're posting about, for example, or in terms of demand generation, then we remain in that fishbowl. I think LinkedIn's most successful when you're connected to the people that you want to see your content, and
Yeah.
then the content is engaging. And I think, again, going back to kind of a pre and post COVID shift that we've just talked about, is that people have now the ability to use AI, for example. So if you get a 10-page document, you could put it through an AI tool, for example, and get a summary. So if you think about how our brains and our expectations are shifting when we're looking at LinkedIn, gone are the days, in my view, where I want to download a white paper, right? Do I want to see a 8 to 15 to 20-second video with the highlights of something and something really interesting and engaging? Absolutely. And are we starting to see LinkedIn become more of a human-centric platform? I think so. Because if you think about what content you watch, are we, when you see photos of people and, joyful moments and people, genuinely excited to be where they're working, have they worked somewhere for 5 years? Those posts tend to do a lot better than a static, download a white paper post. So I think any platform like LinkedIn is only as good as what the content that you put into it. And it's all about that, engaging your audience and getting them to interact with you. And again, it comes down to having the right audience and the right content. And what I always say when we talk about social media to, sort of peers outside in the industry is, would you watch or read or listen to the content that you're creating? And I think as marketeers in general, we have to ask ourselves that and come out of that. Historically, we might have done, for example, a webinar, a blog, etc. But does that exist anymore? And does it have a
Yes.
place in LinkedIn when we are starting to see that creative, user-generated content space happening? And I think that's the way we're going to see it moving forward, is that kind of bite-sized, interesting content. I don't think it should ever become, an Instagram or a Facebook, in my personal view. I think it's a professional network, but that doesn't mean that it can't be human-centric,
Yes.
interesting,
Yeah.
and engaging, because it's going back to the fact that when we buy, whether we're a B2B buyer or a B2C buyer, we're a human, right? We
Yes.
think about what we like to look at. And I think that blur has, the blurred line has come where we are, you know, your job role and who you are. And I think LinkedIn does that really, really well, keeping it professional, but, letting brands really show their personality.
Yeah. No. So I think I've been on LinkedIn since about 2009. Is it 2009, 2010, something along those lines? And I think as you were speaking there, it's clear. Again, we could probably pinpoint it to that COVID rupture that took place, but it doesn't seem right, does it? A gated white paper. As you said, I don't think there's that many people that have the time or the interest or the inclination or curiosity to want to download it, print it maybe, and read it on the train, as would have been the case let's say 8 years ago, that was probably standard marketing collateral, whereas now it's a 45-second sub 2 minute video that, or you just even mentioned even shorter ones, maybe 15, 30 seconds to capture the attention. Huge difference there. Question on that then, if I can. So, given that there's differences in the use of those materials, written materials, and let's say the videos content that you'd see on LinkedIn, what about the PowerPoint deck? I still see masses. I don't think the PowerPoint deck has changed that much from 2018, 2020 to 2026. We've had this huge change, you say, which I agree with, and yet I'm still seeing people rock up with a deck of 20 or 30 slides, and I don't see that having been transformed in anything like the same way as you're mentioning. Are you a PowerPoint fan, or are you?
Yeah, that's do you know, it's really interesting, and I hadn't thought about PowerPoint. And actually, I think as professionals, and again, depending on how long your career's been, we've always been used to kind of putting it on a deck. So if
That's
it's
right.
not, if you can't read it, it doesn't exist. So of course, in every company, I imagine there are still decks that exist. But I think it'll be very interesting to see how we're seeing with our content, if we're reducing our content and understanding that people want to see less and they want the highlights. I would hope to see that kind of shift happen in the workplace. And for example, when we look at look at a deck ourselves, I think we have to look at ourselves and think, would I read that? When we see a deck with, just lines and lines and lines of text and
Oh,
bullet points, do we engage with that? And we have to be honest with ourselves and probably think absolutely not. Or
correct.
should we go to the area where there's actually one or two stats on the page and you can talk about it? And I think that transition's happening slower, in my view, because actually, when we had the pandemic, the one thing we did have was virtual online. So you only had your presentation deck
That's
necessarily
right. We
to
relied on
actually,
it. Yeah.
and that was what you did. We had virtual meetings, whether that
Yes.
was sales or virtual events.
Yeah.
A lot of it was designed on what you could see on the screen. And
Yes.
again, that innovation, I think it has in some areas. I think you now see AI on slides, whether it's Google's beautify your slide or, there are functions and capabilities being brought into deck software. So you can start to, up level that.
You
Again,
can, but I still I think I said this conversation really is just kind of put the light bulb off for me there. As I said, I've been for many years. I have a kind of well, you finished the phrase death by PowerPoint, and I think I see the slides today worse than they were 7 or 8 years ago. I see them with masses of text and information on. How many photos might I see on LinkedIn of somebody at a conference standing there with a big screen and just a massive information on a slide behind them? And in contrast, as I said, we've gone from 8 page, 3,000 word white paper pre-COVID to 15-second animated video post-COVID as being what works. I would say that the PowerPoint deck is the old way. I personally prefer being in a room with a customer and using a flip chart, and on a single sheet of flip chart paper, drawing a simple diagram and making some key points on there. That is the contrast. That is the comparison. That is your 15-second video in comparison to the 8 page white paper.
yeah.
So
And I think on that
thank
note,
you for
I
that.
think, yeah, no, and also I guess it depends what you're trying to achieve, right? Obviously, from my perspective, I'm looking for that hook, that engage, like
Correct.
look, but
Correct.
and that's the short video. So I think there are absolutely technical white papers and information that are
Yes.
that next level down, which is,
Yes.
but actually, if you lead with that, is that the right? Again, lots of different vendors and companies will have different views on this, but if we're looking at that human engagement, that kind of capturing that moment and
Yeah.
that mind share,
Yeah.
for me, that isn't a long white paper. However, we understand that again, there are some times where presentation decks may have to be more in depth, but it's about that initial moment when you're looking at demand generation. What is your first interaction? If your first interaction is, going into a partner office and presenting a 50, slide deck, is that impactful? I would argue no. It's that taking that initial moment and what is that first moment and that first memory of you as a company. And I think that's the kind of the powerful moment. And we're having partners ask us, we don't want to have an hour's session with you. And in a nice way, an hour of just decks. What we'd love to
Yes.
do is maybe a more of a hands-on workshop, maybe it's a
Interactive
capture the
collaboration.
flag, or it's a different way we learn. And I think that's what we're seeing the requests come through. We have partners asking us for shorter content. Can you deliver, your value proposition, your message, your elevator pitch, whatever you want to call it, in 2 minutes, right? And the question back to marketeers is, if we can't, there's a problem. Because if that's what we're being asked for, we need to be able to deliver that. So I think it's a shift for all teams, to be honest with you. And again, people are going to be slower or quicker depending on their personality, their technology adoption. But there is absolutely no doubt that we're moving towards that. Overall, in terms of demand generation, the kind of shorter, that sort of more human-centric content.
No, fantastic. As I said, I've had a few light bulb moments there, so I thank you very much for.
You'll be signing up for a DBA next week, Mark.
Oh, well, no, I'll leave you do that, and if you can be my chat GPT. You can condense it down for me. But no, very, very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. I said times have changed so dramatically, and I said I'm not saying we're in the middle of it. We're definitely out of it now, but I'm not sure that everybody fully appreciates the changes that have taken place. Sounds like, but the beauty is, and it may be, was the MBA as did the MBA act as the mechanism to draw you into thinking along these lines, or has the DBA been more engaging in terms of you having to imagine and think through things?
Yeah, so the MBA was, in my view, so it was a very similar topic, but it
Right,
was more about what other people were saying about
right.
marketing. So
Thought
it's not,
leaders.
yeah, secondary research. So huge focus on sort of like critical literature reviews. What are other people saying about demand generation,
Right.
the sector? And actually, the industry, cybersecurity, is it's got a small representation in the academic world. There's not huge amounts of research that have been done. There are some, but in terms of demand generation post-COVID in cybersecurity, there wasn't that much really to be found, to be, enough, of course, to complete my MBA. But, I thought there was actually a gap here to start looking at this. And
Right.
especially as time moved on, I realized that the post-COVID wasn't ever going back to pre-COVID. It wasn't like it was a
Yes. No.
blip.
That's
It was a
right.
fundamental shift in the industry and marketing in general. So once, there was an opportunity to actually go and speak to people, in that primary research capacity and understand, from humans, that kind of depth and, their personal experiences of that shift. That was what really excited me to go and do the doctorate.
Yes, we did think, didn't we? I mean, as I said, I kind of literally downed tools for the first 6 months of it because we just thought it was going to go back to normal. I was due to be doing events in 2020 with AWS in April of that year. That was postponed, and with Microsoft in April as well of that year. Microsoft originally postponed it. They said we'll do it in May. They thought that we because it was originally 2 weeks to flatten the curve. You may remember, but I think it was about 6 months into it. Just thought, no, this isn't. It's not going away. This is going to change things dramatically. But anyway, let me, let me put that. We'll put COVID to one side. Very interested in what you've been saying there. So look, a couple more questions here. I think I should bring it in again, Charlie and Augie. All right, doing one thing at a time. To write a was this during COVID as well?
No, this was before.
Before COVID, right? So where did this is having read do one thing at a time. As you can say, it's a kind of time management. In one way, I have to ask a question because Charlie ends up doing lots of things. And I think the key message here is to do one thing at a time. Where did the idea for the book come from? And to tell us.
Okay, so as working professionals, I had two young children, and it was busy, right? We all live in a frantic world, and it was at a time where the word mindfulness and the kind of topic of
That's
mindfulness
right.
was kind of coming up, and it was kind of like, okay, interesting, and I was quite interested in the topic. And then actually, I was in a supermarket, and I kind of had a moment where I saw someone in front of me at the counter, and they were on the phone putting their shopping on the conveyor belt and also trying to speak to the cashier. And I was like, wow. And they were stressed, right? They looked stressed. They were kind of doing all these things. So actually, they weren't the person on the phone probably thought they were being rude. The cashier probably thought they were being rude. And actually, they were dropping their biscuits or whatever they were packing. And the whole thing looked like a bit of chaos. And I took a moment and I thought, actually, if he did one thing at a time, so if he just said to the person on the phone, look, I've got to go, can I give you a call back in 10 minutes? They would have been able to, he'd been more mindful. He could have said to the cashier, how are you? How was your day? Thank you very much for your time. He could have made that interaction more mindful, and he would have packed his shopping up in a much more civilized way and left there feeling, a lot less cortisol. So actually, when I look back at my life, I went home, unpacked my shopping, my phone rang. So I was like this in the,
Yes.
drop bags, couldn't find my keys, trying to get in the front door, the dog runs out. It felt really stressful. And I was like, wow, actually, let's just simplify this. Had I not answered the phone, had I just got the shopping out, shut the boot, opened my door, then put my shopping inside, actually, I could have felt a lot better. And I
Yes.
started to look at what I was doing with my children. In the morning, I was like, brush your teeth, get your shoes on, your coat. And of course, they're like, well, you know, what am I doing first? And actually,
Yes.
when I looked at it, I was making their lives a bit more frantic. And again, we're all guilty of it, right? No one's perfect. And I'm not saying I am perfect in any way now at doing it, but it did make me think one thing at a time. So actually, my children are called Charlie and Ollie. And so
Right.
the book is Charlie and Ollie to represent them because I never wanted to really sell a book. I just wanted to have a book as a
Right.
legacy, really, for them. And doing one thing at a time is actually quite powerful. And I think every time now, when I start doing lots of things, and I think, why am I feeling stressed? I then realize it's because I'm trying to do
Too
multiple
much.
things
Yeah.
at once. Yeah, and
Charlie
it's
tries to do too much too, as well, doesn't he? I have to question. Do you think Charlie might have a little touch of ADHD, maybe as well? I mean, the Charlie in here, as to as I said, doing too many things. But it's a lovely book, and I hope you know. I've got four grandchildren, and two of them, well, I think, will be perfectly suited to this. They live in the US. I'll be taking it out there in April or May when we next travel out there. So, congrats! As I said, having a great personal achievement. And hopefully, you really never know of the children that read it. If it does make that impact, it could have extraordinary results. So
and
well done on that. Fantastic.
hopefully the parents get more out of it than the children.
As I said, it's you have to reflect on ourselves, don't we? As I said, there is a kind of self-awareness there. You realise that children, in many respects, are being asked to do so many things at the same time. Prepare for this, do that. We're going here. You got violin lessons. You go in this club. You're doing that. You do. Whereas, as I said, and there was a definite level, a little light bulb moment. You can kind of see adults do that as well. So. Absolutely. Well done. Well done. Now, last question. Well, actually, you got two more, but quickly. I can't go without asking about the Tenable jumper campaign. So, hashtag, is it, yes, never take it off. Can you explain to our audience who may not have seen it or heard of it, what was the Tenable jumper campaign?
Okay, yeah. So each year, we design. Well, it depends where you live. There's a big debate whether it's called a jumper or a sweater. I'm kind of team jumper, but again,
Yes.
depending on where you live in the world, we all call it different things. So it caused a lot of light-hearted debate between everyone at Tenable and in the wider world about whether we call them jumpers or sweaters. So it was back year five, so it's our fifth year of the jumpers. And actually, what it does is create a moment, I'd say a moment of joy, right? So it's about brand awareness, but it's about letting our partners, our employees, and our customers be our storytellers. So we designed the people call it in America an ugly sweater. I call it a beautiful jumper. And we gave these to our partners, our employees, and our customers.
Yes.
And the idea was that the concept around it was, what if people love our jumpers so much they will never take it off? And that's where the idea grew from. So we worked with a fantastic agency on it to start to understand what content we could drive from this. So we created a launch video, which was people wearing the jumper in the sauna, on a run, on a black tie night
I've
out.
seen many of them. Absolutely. All
Yeah, to show,
sorts
and
of
actually,
things.
yeah, and what we found was it really let people express themselves. They were able to say, look, I scuba dive, let me show you, but in the Tenable jumper. So we had mountain climbing, scuba diving, in swimming pools, on pets. And it was fantastic to see people's creativity. And we had over 1 million impressions. And this was on LinkedIn, right? So
Yes.
LinkedIn was a powerful tool to what I'd call break that fishbowl. It got people, to experience a Tenable
Right.
brand, to show that actually we are a credible cybersecurity company, but we've got a personality, and it actually allowed people to engage with us. And the feedback we got was phenomenal. And it was about the joy. We had people following the hashtags because they were looking forward to see, who was going to turn up in their jumper in the shower, or, where was it going to go next? And, it was fantastic. It was so much fun. And the team did such a great job. Again, not just my team, but across Tenable of really getting behind it.
And it was organic marketing as well then, wasn't it? It said it was photographs of people in various parts of the world in their, I was just about to say sweaters. I prefer a jumper actually,
Yes.
and did you say, is this the fifth year, right? This is an annual campaign?
Yeah, so it's the fifth year with the design the jumper, but this was the first year we added the user generated content element, and it really
Brilliant.
took off.
Brilliant.
Like I said, we've had them every year, and I think historically I worked in an EMEA role, so we kind of primarily focused it there, and actually we were able to take it global this year, which was amazing. And what I loved was seeing different cultures, different countries, different landmarks, and it made it truly global. So the jumper had a sort of, it's not many times you can see a sort of like a one product that can work
Yes.
globally, and it really did.
Yes.
Of course we had, hot weather in certain places in the world,
Yes.
but actually it made the campaign more charming because we saw people in Hawaii,
Yes.
etc., in hot
Yeah.
places, in the jumper, in
Yeah.
the sea, and it worked.
Yeah, and it's a knitwear. It was like a winter time kind of Nordic in some respect. Was it a kind of Scandinavian type jumper? But it was great. And as I said, organic. I don't know whether you did any paid promotion on social media, but I saw lots and lots of posts on LinkedIn. So fantastic success to you all.
Yeah,
Very, very, very well done. Well done.
it was
Was it
all
hundreds or
um,
thousands of jumpers that you ordered then? How many did
there
you
was
get?
It was it was in the hundreds,
Right.
but it was around user generated content. So like when we say organic, so it was, the idea was that
Yes.
we showed the video and was like, this is where, these are the kind of funny places you could wear the jumper, and actually it was completely organic. People decided, oh yeah, I want to be involved in this.
Yes.
And I want to show where I can wear my jumper. So it was completely organic, which what me as a marketeer made it so wonderful to see, because people were making that decision, right? It wasn't like we were hiring,
Yes.
influencers to do it, for example, which absolutely has its place. But in this moment, it was about the real humans, our real partners, our real employees, and our real
Brilliant.
customers showing themselves in a Tenable jumper.
Yeah, no, well, that's wonderful. Thank you for that. So I am now on to the last point here, which is with our friends at In Connection. I've been asking each guest on the podcast on this series for their favourite or most memorable corporate hospitality type event. So that could be a president's club or a special event for customers or partners, whatever. Tess, what's your most memorable event, do you think?
Okay, so my most memorable event is going to be Dine in the Clouds with our partners. So we took our partners to talk about cloud security, and this was a few years ago now. 100 feet into the sky. We did it in London, and we did the same one in Dubai. And we took them up 100 feet. You're strapped in, incredible views, and we had a three-course dinner and talked about cloud security.
So just a description, are they like in a pod or something? And
An open pod, so it's kind of so you have a chef cooking on the platform, and there's 22 seats, and it's open sided, so you're not inside anything. You're strapped in as if you were kind of in a roller coaster, and you go up on a crane. It's all very safe, with a company that does it, and you eat your dinner in the sky. It's not for the faint-hearted, but it was
no.
absolutely memorable. And you know if you're going to launch a cloud security product, let's do it in the cloud, right?
That's right. I hadn't made the connection there of in the clouds and cloud security. The marketeers, well done. Congratulations. So, Tess, thank you ever so much. I've taken more of your time than we'd anticipated. Thanks ever so much. I really appreciate it. And as I said, a little light bulb moment went off for me there during our conversation. So thank you ever so much for that as well. I hope to see you again in the not too distant future. But thanks once again. Until then, all the best.
Perfect. Thank you, Mark.